Greetings, true champions of the cause. Welcome to Starplanet Beyond the Canon, where we showcase incredible literary works inspired by your favorite franchises. In today's episode, we dive into part 2 of Tron, Ascension, a fan-made tale set in the iconic world of Walt Disney Productions' Tron, a groundbreaking 1982 science fiction action-adventure film written and directed by Steven Lisberger, with a story by Lisberger and Bonnie McBird. Today's feature is Tron, Ascension, a captivating work written by Keone Snow and published on October 30th, 2017. Now, dear travelers, let's begin. Alan Bradley sat at his desk late into the night, his fingers clicking away at the keyboard as he wrapped up yet another report. Being chairman of the board at NCOM wasn't the dream he'd once had. The thrill of coding, the excitement of solving complex problems, that had all been replaced by endless paperwork, board meetings, and trying to keep the company on track. Still, Alan had taken the job out of loyalty to Flynn, just like his counterpart on the grid, always dedicated, always reliable. The faint light of his desk lamp cast a soft glow on the old pager resting beside him. It was an outdated piece of tech, but Alan couldn't bring himself to get rid of it. There was something nostalgic about holding on to it, a bridge to the past, to Flynn, to the times before everything had changed. His mind drifted to the remarkable developments at NCOM over the last 7 years, under Sam Flynn's leadership. In 2013, the Research and Development Department had unveiled a revolutionary concept, a central processing unit based on photonic technology. Light, not electrical signals, powered the circuits, which allowed for speeds and efficiencies unheard of in traditional systems. But the cost of production was astronomical, so the technology remained within NCOM's walls, powering their most critical projects. 2 years later, another breakthrough arrived. DNA-based storage drives shattered the limits of data capacity. Compact, capsule-like drives held an almost unfathomable amount of information. 2 of them could store all the data humanity had ever produced. But with their reliance on extremely low temperatures and powerful computing clusters to manage the data, this technology, too, remained out of reach for the public. The tower at NCOM transformed over the next few years. The once crowded cubicles with bulky desktops and monitors were replaced by sleek, touch-sensitive workstations. The programming floors now resembled futuristic control centers, with massive wall displays that allowed teams to collaborate on simulations and projects. The company was always ahead of its time, but the costs of these advances were so high that they remained internal innovations, their true potential only glimpsed by those within NCOM. The real triumph came with nCloud. In a world clamoring for faster, more secure ways to store and access files globally, NCOM delivered. A cross-platform file management system, nCloud was quickly embedded into every major operating system. It was fast, reliable, and, thanks to the cutting-edge technology at NCOM, far beyond its competitors. The test was such a success that NCOM sought to monopolize cloud hosting, launching satellites into orbit, each housing a supercomputer and DNA storage arrays. The network spanned the globe, ensuring that every corner of the world had access to nCloud, and with only 3 satellites, NCOM was set for decades of growth. Alan reflected on Sam's transformation during these years. The once rebellious young man had matured, becoming a responsible and innovative leader. Something had changed in Sam, something profound. Whatever had sparked his growth, Alan knew it had been for the better. But tonight, that wasn't enough to shake the growing feeling inside him. He looked over his final report, sighed, and began typing his resignation letter. Across town, Sam Flynn sat alone in his container house, a place that had always offered him peace, away from the overwhelming pace of technology. Despite the fact that Encom Tower loomed in the distance, Sam had kept this refuge free from computers and screens. Yet tonight, his thoughts were troubled. Something wasn't sitting right with him. Alan is leaving? Why? He glanced absently at a flashing billboard advertising nCloud across the street. Before he could dwell on it further, a familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. "I had a feeling you'd be here." Sam turned to see Alan standing at the door. "Why are you leaving, Alan?" Sam asked, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Alan smiled gently. Straight to the point, as always. He took a deep breath, his expression softening. "It's time for me to step away, Sam. And, well, I'm getting old. You don't need me anymore." Sam's mind screamed that it wasn't about that. It was more than just age or responsibilities. Alan had been a constant figure in his life, more of a father to him than anyone else since his grandparents had passed. He had been there through the tantrums, the rebellious outbursts, the darkness, and now Alan was leaving. "What are you going to do?" Sam asked, his voice quiet. "I don't know," Alan replied. "Maybe find a hobby, make some friends." Sam stood, his mind racing. "I'll miss you." "It's not like I'm going off the grid, Sam," Alan said with a chuckle. "You can always call or drop by." But Sam's thoughts caught on that word, grid. A sudden realization dawned on him. Alan had been there, from the beginning. Maybe he needed this more than anyone. Speaking of the grid, Sam began, watching Alan carefully. "Do you remember the digitizing technology?" Alan's face tightened, his mind shifting to memories long buried. "Yes, it was a project from long ago, but it was canceled when your father became CEO. I was there during the first test." He trailed off, his eyes distant, lost in a memory from over 30 years ago. Sam stepped closer, pulling Alan from his thoughts. It wasn't entirely shut down. Alan's gaze snapped back to Sam, his expression a mixture of confusion and curiosity. "Meet me tomorrow morning," Sam said with a knowing smile. "I've got something to show you. Trust me, it's worth it." The old excitement Alan once felt flickered back to life in his eyes. The thought of the grid, the possibilities, and Flynn's legacy stirred something within him. Whatever Sam had in mind, it was going to be monumental. Sam stood in the dim light of Laser Bay 2, the hum of the system filling the room as he watched the old Encom OS come to life on the sleek, futuristic display. It was strange to see something so outdated interfacing with the cutting-edge photonic hardware he had set up, but it worked seamlessly. His father's legacy was still here, contained in those ancient lines of code and the dusty equipment he had moved from Flynn's arcade. With a sigh, Sam reached into his pocket and retrieved a small memory card, its edges worn from years of being carried with him. It was a reminder of the past, of the digital world he had visited once, but hadn't dared return to since. The loss of Flynn and Cora's survival weighed on him. He inserted the card into the reader, watching as the blue light pulsed in rhythm with the data transfer. "I hope you can get something out of this, Alan," Sam muttered under his breath. He didn't know if it would help, but it was all he could do. Beneath the shimmering waves of the sea of simulation, Tron, Alan Bradley's finest creation, drifted, trapped in a never-ending loop of resets. His once vibrant code was fractured, a twisted hybrid of the hero he once was, and the monster Clue had turned him into. Each reset brought a flash of memories, from his proud days as a protector of the grid to the dark, violent actions he carried out as Rinzler. He remembered everything, each betrayal, each moment of helplessness as he followed Clue's orders, and each time he saw Flynn and couldn't act. The pain of those memories surged through him, driving him into another reset. When Tron finally awoke again, it was on the shore near the remnants of the ISO towers. His body felt broken, his light lines flickering weakly. He needed energy, fast. His movements were slow and labored as he pushed himself toward the city. The once glorious skyline now seemed foreign to him. Its brightness faded, its vibrancy dulled. As he stumbled through the streets, blue programs, the same ones he had once hunted, looked on in shock. Flynn's reintegration had undone Clue's repurposing of them, freeing the grid from the tyrant's control. But Tron was not so lucky. He remained as he was, damaged and broken. Exhausted, he collapsed, his mind swirling with flashes of his former life, of what he once was and what he had become. A group of programs rushed to his aid, recognizing the once feared warrior now in dire need. They carried him to a healing station, a sleek metallic structure bathed in soft blue light. He was placed into a restoration pod, his fading light lines barely holding together. A female program stood over him, monitoring the repair process. Her face was calm, her voice soft as she spoke. "You'll need to stay here for a while. Your code is severely damaged, and it will take time to restore it fully." Her words stirred something in him, an echo of the past, a memory long buried. Yori. The name escaped his lips in a whisper, like a half-formed thought from a different life. "Is that your name?" she asked, her voice full of kindness. Tron hesitated. Who was he now? Tron? The once proud guardian of the grid who had failed in his mission? Or Rinzler, the ruthless enforcer who had caused so much destruction? The thought of both identities made him feel unworthy, fractured between who he was and who he had become. "No. My name is..." He paused, his voice faltering. "I don't know my name." "Don't worry," the program said, her voice gentle, as if trying to reassure him. "It will come back to you once the code is restored." But her compassion only deepened his guilt. "I don't deserve this," he thought. "Not after everything I've done." Compassion was something for the worthy, and he had long since forfeited that right. Yet, somewhere deep within the damaged fragments of his code, a flicker of hope remained. A part of him that longed to be whole again, to be Tron, but could he ever be redeemed? And with that, let's take a break. We'll be back after these messages. You are watching Starplanet, Beyond the Canon.
Would you look at that?
The new beef superior is here, only at Starry's. Wherever you are in the universe, there's always one place that feels like home. Starry's, eat in, eat out, but always eat the best.
There is a topic that we should be talking about. Grab a pencil, get a pad, quick. Take company aficionados.
In a world beyond the stars, where ancient forests whisper secrets of forgotten power and shadowed mountains guard the edges of time, there lies Amzot, a realm of untamed wonder, bound by honor and blood, the Herculoids. The Herculoids.
Greetings, true champions of the cause. We hope you're enjoying your stay here on Starplanet. Please allow me to take this opportunity to introduce you to Starplanet Music, a continuously expanding portfolio of musical works that spans an impressive array of genres. Starplanet Music, the future of the underground. Visit starplanetmusic.com today.
The universe is a grand place, full of uncertainty. But the one thing you can be sure on is the greatest pizzas can always be found at Pistol Star Pizza, with over 500 trillion outlets throughout the universe. One thing is for sure, you'll never go hungry at Pistol Star Pizza. Pistol Star Pizza. At Pistol Star Pizza.
Welcome back. Let's continue. Alan sat in front of the console, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. The dim light of the room was cast by the glow of the old ENCOM system, its ancient command line interface awaiting his next move. He had been poring over files for hours, trying to understand the intricacies of Flynn's altered system, but it was all a blur. The code was dense, full of Flynn's unique modifications, mixed with digitization routines that Alan couldn't fully decipher. Every directory he opened led to more questions, more complexity, and yet, his curiosity refused to let him stop. Sam had told him everything: the grid, Clue, Tron, and Flynn's ultimate sacrifice. Alan's mind raced with possibilities, but also with fear. The grid was an unknown world, one that had taken so much from Sam. But could it also offer answers? Or redemption? He stared at the command to activate the digitizing laser, the cursor blinking at the end of the subroutine. Should I do this? Meanwhile, within the grid, Rinzler struggled with his broken code. He had become a ghost in the system, lost and fragmented, constantly resetting his memories of his past life as Tron clashed with the darker reality of who he had been forced to become. The once mighty guardian of the grid was now reduced to moments of clarity, interrupted by confusion and guilt. The city around him had begun to heal. Programs who had once feared him now went about their lives, rebuilding and restoring the structures damaged during Clue's reign. The absence of a leader didn't seem to hinder them. In fact, many of the creative programs had taken it upon themselves to restore order. But Rinzler, or Tron, whoever he was still broken. His code was too damaged, too conflicted. Alaire, the operator at the healing station, had spent countless cycles by his side, trying to help him recover. There was something about him that drew her in. His mystery, his silent strength, the way he seemed lost, but not defeated. She had never seen his face, never heard him speak more than a few words at a time, but she felt his struggle. One microcycle, they ventured out of the city, walking in silence. Rinzler led her to the outlands, where the grid gave way to darkness and quiet. The place felt distant, almost forgotten, and the only light came from their own glowing energy lines. Alaire wasn't afraid, only curious. She stopped and turned to face him. "Please," she whispered, "take off that helmet. You don't need to hide out here. No one can see you, not even I." Rinzler hesitated, his fingers twitching at the edges of his mask. For a long moment, he stood still, the only sound the faint hum of the grid in the distance. Then, slowly, He reached up and removed the helmet. His face was still mostly obscured by the shadows, but a faint, broken line of code flickered across his left side, a reminder of the damage he had sustained, both physically and mentally. "I haven't done this in so long," he said, his voice low and raw. "I forgot how it feels." His voice was different, softer, more vulnerable. Alaire stepped closer, her heart racing. She reached out cautiously, her hand trembling as she touched his face, feeling the line of damaged code beneath her fingertips. His skin was cool, the code sparking faintly where her hand touched it. For a brief moment, time seemed to stop. Then, without thinking, she leaned in and kissed him. Rinzler stiffened, his body rigid and unresponsive. He didn't move, didn't push her away, but he didn't return the gesture either. Alaire pulled back, her face flushed with embarrassment. She turned away quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. I shouldn't have done that." Rinzler stood in silence for a moment longer before she heard the faint sound of his helmet reactivating. When he spoke again, his voice was cold, distant, the same harsh tone he used when he was Clue's enforcer. "I am not what you're looking for." The words hung in the air, heavy with regret. Alaire said nothing, but she felt the sting of his rejection. They walked back to the city in silence, the unspoken tension between them palpable. Rinzler disappeared the next microcycle. Alaire returned to her station, but the emptiness of the admin residence weighed heavily in the air, an undeniable void that lingered in every corner. The place had once been full of Clue's elite guards, filled with the constant hum of activity. Now it was silent, with only faint echoes of the past lingering in the walls. The city had moved on, but Rinzler could not. Back in his personal quarters, Rinzler found himself drawn to the security console. Old habits died hard. His mind was scattered, his memories fragmented, but the instinct to protect the grid was still there, buried deep within him. As he scanned the system, a flashing alert caught his attention. Portal active. His heart, or whatever passed for it in his damaged code, leapt in his chest. The portal? He hadn't dared hope. Flynn was gone. But if the portal was open, someone was coming through. Sam? Quora? Without hesitation, Rinzler rezzed his light cycle and sped toward the portal. He didn't know what he would find, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't the protector of the grid anymore. Whoever was coming deserved to know the truth. Alan stood at the edge of the city, marveling at the world before him. The grid was unlike anything he had ever imagined. Vast, luminous, and alive in a way that was hard to comprehend. Beneath his feet, the ground had a strange texture, both firm and soft, like walking on light itself. In the distance, the city glowed, buzzing with activity, a beacon in the otherwise dark, angular landscape. But it wasn't the city that held his attention now. Out of the shadows, a figure emerged, a strange silhouette with glowing red lines and an armored suit that made him look both ancient and futuristic. The program moved with purpose, but there was a hesitance in his posture, as if he was uncertain of his place in this world. "Who are you?" Alan asked, his voice calm but curious. The program stopped, his black helmet obscuring any features. "My name is Alan. I need to see Kevin Flynn." At the mention of Flynn, the program seemed to tense. He stepped back, his posture suddenly rigid. "Are you Alan 1? Alan's heart skipped. "Yes, only one program knows that name." He narrowed his eyes, piecing it together. "Tron?" At the mention of the name, the program recoiled, staggering slightly, as if the word itself caused him pain. "I am not Tron." He turned his back quickly, his voice filled with conflict. Alan's suspicion deepened. This program might not want to acknowledge it, but Sam had told him about Clue's corruption and the tragic repurposing of Tron. He took a step forward, speaking more gently. If you're not Tron, then who are you? The program's shoulders slumped. I don't know. The response tugged at Alan's heart. He had built this program. No, this person. Seeing Tron like this, fractured and uncertain, was a painful reminder of how far things had fallen. But Alan wasn't ready to give up. He softened his tone further. Okay, we'll leave that for now. How about you show me around? And tell me, where is Kevin Flynn? The program stood still, his posture defeated. Flynn is no longer active. He dispersed into the grid after Clue was reintegrated. It was the end of both. Alan had known deep down that this was the likely truth, but hearing it confirmed was like a blow. He had held on to the hope that somehow Flynn had survived, that there was a way to bring him back. Now, that hope was gone. Kevin Flynn, his old friend, was truly lost. For a moment, silence hung between them. Alan 1 stared at the glowing city in the distance, taking in the enormity of it all. This digital world that Flynn had spent so much of his life in was now his legacy. This, and the broken program standing beside him. Alan 1. The program's voice broke the silence. It was soft, tentative, like a child asking for permission. I am sorry. Alan turned to face him. There was something in the program's voice, a raw emotion that tugged at the engineer's heartstrings. He was certain now. This was Tron. But the damage Clue had done to him was deep. Tron was lost, not just physically, but mentally. Tell me about what happened here, Alan said, his voice firm but compassionate. Everything, from the moment Flynn came to the grid until now. They stood in Clue's former residence, the best vantage point in the city. From here, Alan could see the sprawling architecture of the grid, a mixture of towering buildings, sharp geometric shapes, and pulsing lights. It was both beautiful and haunting. As Rinzler, or Tron, Alan still wasn't sure what to call him, recounted the history of this place, Alan felt the weight of the story pressing down on him. The betrayal, the battles, the repurposing, and the sacrifice. It was all too much. Tron, the guardian of the system, had been forced to become something he wasn't, something darker, and now he was lost, unsure of his identity, broken. Alan 1. Rinzler's voice broke through his thoughts once again. I have a request. Alan turned, seeing the program standing stiffly, as if holding himself together was a constant struggle. Can you schedule my code for deresolution? Alan's eyes widened. You want to be derezzed? Rinzler nodded, his helmet still facing away. I can't continue like this. The damage is too great. I can't be what I was meant to be. Alan shook his head, his voice filled with determination. I can't do that, but I will fix you, so you don't need to depend on healing patches anymore. Will I forget my past? The question was almost a whisper, but the fear in it was palpable. No, Alan said. Your memories are intertwined with your code. Erasing one would destroy both. It's too risky, especially after what Clue has already done to you. Then what's the point? Rinzler said, his voice trembling. What's the point of being functional if I have to live with everything I've done? Alan's gaze softened. Because you're Tron, and the grid needs you. That is the point. Rinzler's hands balled into fists. I'm not Tron, he shouted, the helmet obscuring whatever pain was written across his face. Alan sighed. He understood now. Rinzler, Tron, felt unworthy of the name. He had been Clue's enforcer, had done terrible things. He couldn't reconcile the person he had been with the protector he once was. "Okay," Alan said, his voice calming. "Rinzler." He extended his hand. "Give me your disc." Rinzler hesitated, but eventually handed over the disc. Alan held it in his hands, watching as the code unfolded before him. The damage was extensive, but something else caught his eye. There were elements of Clue's modifications, but there was also something new, something unfamiliar. It was evolving, changing. It was almost alive, like the isomorphic algorithms Sam had told him about. "This will be tricky," Alan muttered to himself. He began the process of extracting the corrupted code, letting the system fill in the gaps with the strange new traits that had developed in the sea of simulation. It was delicate work, but after what felt like hours, he finished. Alan looked up. "Are you ready?" Rinzler was silent for a long moment, staring at the disc. Then, finally, he nodded. "Don't worry," Alan said with a small smile. "This time you won't feel a thing." When Rinzler reactivated after the reset cycle, he felt whole again. His internal diagnostics showed that his systems were functioning perfectly. The damaged parts of his code had been repaired, his energy flow was stable, and though the red lines on his suit remained, a reminder of Clue's influence, something within him felt different. He flexed his hands, watching the steady pulse of light flow through the circuits on his body. But the sense of relief was dulled by something deeper. He looked across the room to Alan, who was resting against a console, looking oddly peaceful, despite the harsh digital environment. The user, Alan 1, had done something remarkable, something he didn't think he deserved. Rinzler moved silently toward the mirrored surface of a nearby projection, removing his helmet. His reflection stared back at him, whole once more. His face was as it always had been, the visage of Tron, the defender of the grid. But seeing that familiar face, unmarred and pristine, made his heart, if that's what it was, ache. He did not feel worthy of this restoration, not after all the things he'd done under Clue's command. "Have I done a good job?" Alan's voice cut through his thoughts. The user was awake now, smiling at him. It was the same warm, reassuring smile he remembered. Rinzler turned to him, struggling to find the right words. Thank you, Alan 1. Alan sensed something deeper behind the gratitude. There was an unease in the way the program stood there, staring at him. "I can see there's something troubling you," Alan said gently. "Why don't you tell me about it?" The warmth in Alan's voice unsettled Rinzler, but it also drew him in. For so long he had known only commands, orders, and rigid purpose. This was different. This was someone willing to listen, someone who cared. "Why did you restore my code?" Rinzler asked, his voice unsteady, as if afraid of the answer. Alan sighed, considering the question. "Because I could, and I knew that. Deep down, you wanted it too, even if you won't admit it. I created you, Tron. You're unique. And it was painful to see you like that, broken and lost." Hearing his old name stirred something in Rinzler, but it also felt distant, as though it no longer belonged to him. He gazed at Alan, seeing the weight of years etched into his face, the strength in his posture, the kindness in his eyes. For the first time, the program understood that Alan 1 was not just a user, not just his creator. He was something more. "But based on all the things I've done under Clue's leadership," Rinzler said, his voice low, "do you think this was a wise decision? You should restore me to a previous version, or derez me." Alan shook his head, recognizing the guilt behind those words. He had to approach this carefully. knowing how fragile Rinzler's sense of identity was. "Is this what I should do because you failed your purpose?" Alan asked. "Or because you want it to happen?" Rinzler hesitated. "Aren't they the same?" "No, they aren't," Alan said, stepping closer. He had to make this program understand, had to reach him. "You failed, but can you tell me why?" "Clue repurposed me," Rinzler answered. "And did you fight it?" "Yes. I tried to take control through the interface link." "And why couldn't you?" "Because he created a device that blocked my efforts." Alan continued his questions, patient but firm. "After Clue finished the process, were you aware of your past identity as Tron?" "No." "Were you aware of my existence?" "No." "Did you enjoy derezzing the programs in the arena and during the games?" Rinzler's answer was immediate. "Number it was my duty. Clue commanded it, and I had to comply." "So, you're telling me you were under Clue's complete control?" "Yes." Alan looked at him, his expression softening as he asked the final question. "Given these circumstances, do you still believe you failed your purpose?" Rinzler hesitated. The answer that had seemed so certain a moment ago now felt less so. "Yes," he finally said, though the word was quieter, less assured. Alan stepped closer, facing him directly. "You failed your purpose because you had no choice, and you can't blame yourself for that. I know you disagree," Alan added, his voice soft but insistent. "But that's only because the guilt makes it unbearable. That guilt shows how much you care for the grid and for the programs here." Rinzler stood still, his thoughts in turmoil. Alan's words resonated, but accepting them felt impossible. How could he forgive himself after all that had happened? His identity was fractured, torn between the warrior he used to be and the enforcer Clue had made him. And yet, standing there with Alan 1, he felt something he hadn't in a long time. He felt understood. "You need to forgive yourself," Alan said gently, placing his hands on Rinzler's shoulders, forcing the program to meet his gaze. "You couldn't have done anything to stop it. No one could have." Rinzler's mind raced, the thoughts too jumbled to make sense of. He didn't know how to respond, didn't know how to process the surge of emotions he hadn't felt in so long. Before he even realized what he was doing, his body reacted. His left arm reached out, pulling Alan closer, his right hand clutching the fabric of Alan's shirt. It was an instinctual, desperate gesture, and for the first time, Rinzler let himself feel vulnerable. Alan, without hesitation, wrapped his arms around the program in a warm embrace. It was a gesture of compassion, of reassurance. In that moment, Alan understood something profound. This program, this being of code and light, was the closest thing he had ever had to a son. And just like that, the weight of all their shared pain seemed a little lighter. And with that, true champions of the cause, Part 2 of our story has reached its end. In the next installment of Beyond the Canon, we'll bring the entire narrative to a close, wrapping up everything that has been written so far. I thank you for spending this time with us, and I look forward to seeing you again. Please let your thoughts be known in the comments. I truly look forward to reading them. So, until next time, please like, comment, and subscribe. Go visit enterstarplanet.com for more. And until our paths meet again, I have been your host, Arius. See you in the shadows, my love.